Welcome back to the Collegiate Live, the official podcast of GRCC's student publication, The Collegiate. In today's episode, Trump goes golfing in Scotland, and key political figures change their messaging on Gaza. Plus, sports writer Jack Walker revisits his MLB predictions from the start of the season, and a review of the Fantastic Four first steps. If you have a topic you want covered on the show, or a question you want answered by one of our hosts on air, send it our way by going to thecollegiatelive.com/podcast. So recently, Donald Trump made headlines. He was on a foreign relations trip to Scotland. He was supposed to be talking about foreign policy and tariffs and the kinds of things you would expect an international trip for the president to do. But while he was there, he also opened his golf course. He has golf courses around the world. If I recall correctly, this is not the first in Scotland, but it was an odd time for him to open a golf course. This was his fifth international trip since beginning his second term in January, according to a report from The Independent. And, apparently the cost of this trip is estimated to be about $9.7 million. And a lot of that's going to be paid for by taxes, by the taxpayers. So a lot of debate has been happening about Trump using this taxpayer money, around $10 million of it, to go on a golf trip.
Well, I know a lot of the people in Scotland weren't happy about it, and it's not even their tax dollars.
Yes. Scotland, a lot of countries when he's gone there, and most of his international trips have not been happy that he's been there. Scotland in particular seemed very unhappy that he was there. There were protests that were occurring with Scottish citizens, people that have no real connection to the United States other than Trump was there, and they were protesting. They were holding signs. Some of them were very polite.
Some of them got really creative.
Yeah, there was one sign. I'm looking here. I report from Axios. There's one sign that says, "Oh, you're the American idiot Green Day was on about," which is a creative one. One of them has a picture of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Currently, that whole debate's been going on about
not
whether
to
Trump's name
mention
is
the
in
truck.
Yes, I will get there in just a moment. But one of the signs has a picture of Trump and Epstein, captioned "Very bad people, not welcome." One of them features Trump, and it looks like a devil costume with a red face. So plenty of variety in these protest signs. But also, as Jamie mentioned, there was a truck that was driving around. It was one of the trucks that has a video wall as one of the sides of the truck, and it featured a picture of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. It's been circulating as proof that they were allegedly friends before Jeffrey Epstein's death, and it was just driving around just to be a part of the conversation. Scotland did not seem happy that Trump was there.
Yeah.
Nope.
I think most people are thinking especially in Gaza, you have people starving, and then Trump is this powerful figure, and he's supposed to be, doing something about it, but he's golfing instead.
It's odd timing for him to be there.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot going on, specifically relating to the genocide in Gaza. Because of the United States' long relationship with Israel, we have been providing weapons for Israel. We even had politicians signing bombs before we sent them to Israel.
Nikki Haley literally wrote "finish them" on one of the bombs.
Yes, so the official policy of the federal government has been very pro-Israel and anti-Gaza, and a lot of the public sentiment, especially with younger voters, has been pro-Palestine and anti-Israel's actions in that area. And so it's been a time of a lot of division within this conversation, but the only thing that hasn't changed is that the government refuses to call it a genocide. And then on Monday, on Twitter, Marjorie Taylor Greene changed course and called it a genocide. She said in a statement on Twitter, "It's the most truthful and easiest thing to say that October 7th in Israel was horrific, and all hostages must be returned. But so is the genocide, humanitarian crisis, and starvation happening in Gaza." And that is it's interesting that she would, at this point, start calling it a genocide when the official stance so far has been that it's a war, that we are on Israel's side in the war, and to call that a genocide is just factually incorrect, has been the sentiment. So it's odd to see this reversal.
I'm very suspicious of why. Part of me wonders, I don't think, really her viewpoint might have changed. I think it's probably because oh crap, I need voters and stuff. So because like the Trump administration and them are losing a lot of the young vote and stuff, and like you said, a lot of the young voter demographic and the young people are very pro-Palestinian. So they're probably thinking if we admit that, Gaza's a genocide, they'll migrate back to us. It's not going to work, of course, but that's probably what they're thinking,
It is odd timing because around the same time that Marjorie Taylor Greene said that, Trump said that he had seen images, this is according to NBC News, said that he had seen images of Palestinians on TV and that, quote, those children look very hungry. He later said that those scenes were real starvation and you can't fake that.
Real starvation? You can't fake that?
I don't know what that refers to. I don't know.
I mean,
if it's like fake news.
At this point, we can't be surprised about anything that Trump says. I'm just curious about what the American limit is. We're sitting here watching all this stuff happen, and no one's doing anything about it. And what's the point where we're like, this is enough?
Well, there have been protests around the world. In Scotland, I have a news article here from Philadelphia. There was a protest. Specifically, they were organizing one specific protest to bang on pots and pans, to make noise, to visibly draw attention to what's happening, and to, like you were talking about, sort of get people to pay attention to it, because a lot of people in the government, but also just in American society, are insulated from what's happening. They're not exposed to it unless they want to be. And the idea of this protest is to get people to pay attention to it. In the one in Philadelphia, they tried to go inside a train station, and they were denied access because they need a permit to do that. So they were outside in sort of the area outside the station. In Scotland, they were in this public square. So it is happening all around the world, trying to draw attention to this. It'll be interesting to see how the American response is affected or not by the administration changing their language, by these protests, to see if something comes of this seeming shift in the American view towards this crisis, or if this is all a moment that will pass.
I mean, it's hard when also, like, we've been protesting, like, there's been protests throughout his, like, second term, and, it doesn't really feel like it's doing anything anymore. Like, it's almost become, like, people are desensitized to protests now, because it's just like, it's great, yeah, like, everyone is together, and they're fighting for this thing, but what is that actually doing for us, Like, yeah, we're showing that we don't, like, we care about this thing and we want it to change, but, at this point, our government's not even going to listen to us. So what's the point, and where do we start doing different actions to change these things?
Protests are, in essence, to draw attention to things, but this isn't an event that needs attention. This has attention.
Yeah.
The problem is that it doesn't have any action based on it. People are aware of this, but they're still not acting.
It's not even so much that drawing attention, it's willful ignorance. Like, the people are, like, trying to draw their attention, but the administration's just basically, like, putting their for so long they've been putting their fingers in their ears and closing their eyes. If you try to draw attention to what Israel's doing is wrong, they just call you anti-Semitic, and that was their favorite defense tool, was just to say, oh, you hate Israel, or oh, you're anti-Semitic. That's what they were calling the people when they were protesting on the college campuses. They would say you hate Jewish people, which of course isn't the case at all. Like, I have family members who would watch Fox News, and I'd hear that stuff spoken 100 times a day, and they would just repeat that on loop. The protesters are just anti-Semitic fools, basically. They're just anti-Semitic fools, And now to hear them suddenly be like, well, there's truth in that. I'm very skeptical of whether or not they're actually going to do anything, or if they're just trying to satiate the young here. So,
Yeah.
Vice President J.D. Vance was asked in an NBC News interview about the situation, and he said he was very worried about the humanitarian problem in Gaza and wanted to make sure starving children got food. This is coming around the same time that the federal government is preparing to burn about 500 tons of emergency food. Now, USAID, the international defense branch of the U.S. government, had been preparing emergency supplies, but when Elon Musk's Doge took over, they cut funding and basically halted any systems that USAID had in place, including the shipment of that food. Now, food has a shelf life, and it was about to expire, and experts warned the government that it's going to expire, and there were many plans to try to do something with the food, and none of it got done because of the blockade. So that food is now expired and is now about to be burned. So it is troubling to hear things like J.D. Vance saying he's concerned about the humanitarian problem while burning 500 tons of food that were meant to address that humanitarian concern. Because can we believe that somebody is worried about a problem if they're actively trying not to fix it?
I mean, honestly, what we're hoping happens, for the better, like talking about how can we fix this to where people are being helped and our government is actually doing what they need to do. I mean, that's a big question because you don't even know where to start. I mean, Trump's got himself in such a big hole. It's like, how can we even come back from this at this point?
Sure.
So, I mean, for students, it's always good to be reading the news and staying updated with what's going on. And make sure you're reaching out to your representatives and making sure that they know how you feel about those issues. I know sometimes it can be scary to call and, talk about those things, but that's what they're there for, and that's what you should do if you really want to make a difference.
And vote when the time comes,
Yes.
Vote them out. That's what I'd say, if you don't like what they're doing, vote them out. Vote for the other party,
I know there's numerous, GoFundMe stuff going on online for these types of things. But yeah, really, it's just holding our government accountable and making sure that they're doing what they need to do.
Use your voice,
At the beginning of the current MLB baseball season, sports writer Jack Walker made some predictions for what he thought might happen during the season. Now, as the season's reaching its conclusion, he revisits those predictions to see how he did.
Oh, earlier this year, back in March, I made a Tigers preview, but I also, in the same article, had a few predictions for the season. And now that we're past the All-Star game and we're winding down the season, I figured it'd be a respectable time to check in, see how those predictions are doing. So without further ado, here's prediction 1 I made from back in March. My prediction was the Tigers don't win their division but make the playoffs. So off the rip, not the greatest prediction of all time. The Tigers have been in first place for majority of the year. They still are. I believe they have a 9-game lead over the Cleveland Guardians. I'm happy to wear this one. I'm very glad that they're in first place in their division. I would prefer for that to be the case. I did say they'd make the playoffs. Now, they are looking pretty – things can change, but, again, with a 9-game lead with under 60 games left, it's pretty likely they make the playoffs. So give myself half a point on that one, but this is one I'm very glad to be wrong on. Again, prefer they win their division. And, again, a lot can change with the trade deadline, but just based off of how this season has gone. And the Tigers have probably already hit their toughest stretch of the year when they went, I think, 2-12 in 14 games. I don't think they're going to do that again, just based off of the last year sample size. So considering that they went through that and they still have a 9-game lead, I think they're set to win the division. Hopefully this doesn't backfire on me, but we'll see. Second prediction. This was an easy one to make as a Tigers fan. Skubal wins, Tarek Skubal that is, wins his back-to-back Cy Youngs, win his second one of his career. Skubal, I mean, he's going into the season, he was already the unanimous best pitcher in the American League, and he's showing why. Again, he's having another phenomenal year, probably better than last year. He's been the favorite to win the Cy Young basically all season, and he's not let that up. And I also mentioned in here that Garrett Crochet of the Red Sox and Jacob deGrom of the Rangers would be 2 other names to look out for. I got to give myself a pat on the back for this one. Crochet's been second basically all year in the running, and deGrom's been about third or fourth. I also mentioned Max Fried of the Yankees. He's had another strong year. And that was a guy, I mean, all 3 of those guys, well, not deGrom, but Crochet and Fried were on new teams, and deGrom, basically, who knew what he was going to be because he's dealt with a lot of injuries. So very glad with how that take has gone. I mean, the Skubal prediction was pretty easy, but listing those other names in there definitely helps my case considering those guys have been top 5 most of the year. So that was a pretty good take, I would say. This one, this one still has time. It was Riley Green of the Tigers finished his top 10 in MVP voting. Now, Green started off the year really well. He went through a slump early in April, but he adjusted pretty well after that. Entered the month of July with an OPS over 900, including his first game in July with a 2-homer game. But since then, he's kind of had a rough month of July. He has hit 7 homers, but he's struck out 40 times in 90 at-bats, which is quite a few. 700 OPS just about, hitting 200 for the month. It's not been great. He was named an all-star starter, so he does have that on his resume. But he's definitely going to need to probably pick up the pace a little bit. He had a nice 3-hit game yesterday with a homer. That helps. But just based off trajectory of the last month or so, it's not been great. But him playing on a team with as good of a record as he has will help his case as well. Being an all-star starter helps. He has 26 homers in July, which means he should hit 30 at least. Could get close to 40. We'll see. If he hits 40, I would be pretty stunned if he wasn't top 10. But I think 35, he's gonna have a good case. American League, it's not been the greatest of years, but at the top, there's great talent. Once you get past it, it's the usual suspect. So I think he has a chance to get in the top 10, but he's gonna need to pick it up. If you would have asked me about a month ago, I would have probably said he was finishing top 10, but we'll see. I think he has a good case though to make it, but again, July wasn't too kind for him, so we'll see if he can pick it up or not. Now, for my fourth take, I said that Shohei Ohtani and Bobby Witt Jr. will take home this year's MVPs. Now, start off the rip, Bobby Witt is not going to win MVP. He's had a great year. He's having another strong year, as he's been doing. I thought he would perhaps take the leap that, take that MVP level leap, I guess. He's had a good year, but in the American League, there's 2 people named Aaron Judge and Cal Raleigh who are having just phenomenal, like borderline historic years for their respective positions. Judge, I think, will win it. However, he did just get injured, so we have to see this how severe the injury is. If he's on the 10-day injured list, if it's just 10 days, I think he'll be fine. If it goes anything past that, then I think Cal Raleigh of the Mariners will definitely have a good chance at taking home MVP. He's already got 41 homers as a catcher, which just doesn't even make sense. Most catchers don't do that. He's got it with about 50, 60 games left to go. So he's having a phenomenal year. I mean, those two have been basically neck and neck for MVP just about all year. But I think Judge is the deserving player just because he's just having an unbelievable year. He just keeps getting better with age. So fortunately for Bobby Witt, maybe next year. Probably not this year. But Ohtani, he's definitely very much in the race in the National League. I think he's the favorite just because of how dominant he's been offensively. He's at 38 homers, OPS nearing 1,000. The problem for him is he is just a DH. Now, he has pitched a couple of innings as he's been, he's been known for his two-way dominance. But because of his Tommy John surgery a couple years ago, he's just now getting back into pitching. So he's only got a few innings under his belt. I don't think it's going to be enough to sway voters. So because of his primary DH, he can't field. He can't get extra, stats from that. Whereas Pete Crow Armstrong of the Cubs, who came out of nowhere, really, he was a former top prospect, but struggled last year in his rookie season. He's just taken an unreal leap. Because of how good he's a 5-tool player. He can do just about everything on the field, especially fielding. He's a great fielder, fast, hits for power. Struggled a little bit with strikeouts. So that's not a big deal. Ohtani struggles with strikeouts. It's a thing. So I don't know who's going to win that one. It's coming down the wire. I believe Ohtani is the favorite. But I mean, if PCA can put together a really strong last 2 months of the season, would not be surprised if he won it. I think those two will definitely finish up as the 1 and 2 in the National League race. And for my final prediction, I said the Dodgers will win the World Series against the Rangers in 5 games. Now, this one, who knows? Baseball's a weird sport, especially in October. Really, anyone can make it. I look back 2 years ago. I look at the Diamondbacks, who, I think they won 84 games, just snuck in. They made the World Series. They lost in 5 to the Rangers, but no one expected them to be there. That's what the beauty of baseball in October is. So for the Dodgers, they're going to be the favorites in the National League. They currently have the best record. Well, no, the Brewers have the best record. But and the Brewers have done really well against the Dodgers this year. But in October, I'd probably still lean the Dodgers just because of the talent they have. Now, one thing about the Dodgers is despite their record, their pitching has been not good. They've dealt with a lot of injuries on the pitching. If those guys get healthy for October, they're a different team. But right now, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, and I guess that's the consequences you make when you pick up injury-prone pitchers. But they're living with that. There's a deadline for them to make moves if they do. But I'm still sticking with the Dodgers. I'm not going to go against them. They have Ohtani, they have Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith. They got a good amount of players. But the Rangers have not performed as well as I thought they would. The American League is wide open, though, this year, if you ask me. So the Rangers currently are 56 and 52. They're currently third in their division, and they're currently 1 game out of the wild card. So they're still in the mix to make the playoffs. They've been playing better as of late, but they still have a ways to go. Their offense has been bad this year. Even if they make the playoffs, I think their offense is so bad, I don't think they'll have a chance in October. So I'm not going to rule this one out because there's still plenty of time left to go, but it's not looking great for the Rangers. Now, I also did pick in here. I said if they didn't make it, I did say Boston, the Red Sox, would have a chance. And Boston, they're currently in the wild card. I was a little scared of this take about a month or two ago when they were struggling. They were under 500. They traded Rafael Devers. Ever since that trade, though, they've been better, which I didn't think would be possible after trading your best hitter. They've gotten better somehow. So the Red Sox are saving me a little bit in that take. I think World Series, I'm not sure if they have it, but again, I think the American League's open, so I think you just got to make it and you got a shot. So we'll see how that plays out.
A couple days ago, I saw The Fantastic Four First Steps, the newest entry from the MCU, and the introduction of the Fantastic Four to the MCU. Before the movie came out, we had a discussion here at the Collegiate talking about our thoughts and predictions for the movie, and overall, we were all pretty excited for it and heard good things. So going into the movie, I had a lot of high hopes. And leaving the movie, I have some thoughts. Most importantly, yeah, it was really good. Specifically, everything in the movie felt very tactile. None of it felt like I was watching a big blockbuster, and none of it felt like it was CGI. It took me, I think it was about an hour, when I finally realized, oh, wait a minute, these things aren't real, right? Like, they're not actually in space. The Baxter Building isn't a real building. The thing doesn't exist because, well, I think a couple things. First of all, I think it really helped that they did a lot of the things that they needed to practically. Pedro Pascal did an interview with Marvel ahead of the movie's release, and he said that Times Square, if you've seen the movie, you'll know they have a lot of scenes that happen in their version of Times Square, and they actually built that. It isn't CGI. They actually built this entire city block, which was the right choice because of how much the movie takes place there. But you can feel that it's real, and you can feel that the actors know it's real. Actors often talk about, when they're filming on a giant green screen, eventually the environment gets added, but they don't know what to react to. There are marks that tell them where to look, and they know how to act, but it is different than acting opposite a real person or acting in a real environment. And Pedro Pascal talked about being sort of astounded that they had built this entire city block, and I think you can tell in the performances. The performances feel very genuine and real, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they did a lot of this for real, and the things that they had to augment with CGI, they had a lot of really good material to match it to because they had a lot of things done practically, so the CGI wasn't, in a vacuum. They knew exactly what the CGI would look like because they had so much real reference. It also had a very distinct style and tone to it, and I think a lot of the MCU falls into that weird territory where it does have a tone, it does have a style, but it's sort of the MCU version of that. If you look at something like Captain America, The Winter Soldier versus Guardians of the Galaxy, they are different movies. And so, depending on which director, even something like, look at Thor: The Dark World versus Thor: Ragnarok. Right, that's the same characters, the same movie, the same story, but a different director, a different vision, and it is a very different film. And so it's not that MCU movies don't have their own identity, it's that in service of the universe and the consistency there, I think a lot of times the films end up a little bit too unified because they do need some sort of common language, common idea, because you want people to be able to watch all of them, right? If the movies were too different, you wouldn't want to watch all of them, and then you'd be confused because you didn't watch the Thor movie because you didn't like the Thor, tone, you didn't like that kind of movie, so you didn't watch it, so now you're confused. So they need to be similar. But I think a lot of them end up being too similar, and so you don't want to watch them because they're not very unique. But this movie, I think, really struck that balance where it still checked all the boxes that a Marvel movie needed to, right? If you look at the plot arc, it's pretty similar. It's not that unique. But in the writing, in the specifics of the story, in the tone it has, it doesn't really feel like an MCU movie at all, which I think is a really good thing. I think that putting this in an alternate universe was a really smart decision. And Kevin Feige has said that in some way, the events of Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars will lead to a reboot of the MCU where you will be in a new dimension. Now, that does mean that the entire continuity is moving to a new dimension, which means that they'll have the chance to sort of reinvent what the MCU tone feels like, but it will likely still be that one unified tone for all the movies, and so that might not actually help anything. But I think specifically because this was a one-off movie, we know that eventually they're going to end up being in the main universe because they're going to be in Doomsday, or I guess Doom might come to their. I'm not going to spoil anything. It does seem like maybe Doom might come to their universe, maybe they go to the other universe. There are some things that hint at maybe both. We're unsure, but it's unlikely that they'll never interact with the main heroes. It'll be interesting to see what the future of the Fantastic Four looks like because I really hope that we get to stay in that universe more. Maybe that's where we go. That we go to that universe. The movie kicks off immediately with a little tag at the bottom that tells you what Earth you're on. You're not in the main continuity. We are in a different universe. There is exactly one Easter egg to the main MCU, and it's that in Times Square there's a sign for, I forget what it is, but it's called Westview, and that's the name of the city in WandaVision because the director of this also directed WandaVision. So he put a reference to his own work, but that was the only MCU reference because this was the only hero in this universe. The Avengers don't exist here. There were a couple references to Jack Kirby and to Stan Lee because they created the characters, but it was its very own standalone universe. And I think what that allowed it to do is instead of having to reference other MCU projects, instead of having to have all those tie-ins, it could really be a love letter to the era it was in. It really felt like the people that made it, all the people, from wardrobe to cinematography to writing to direction to editing, a lot of the editing was really good. It felt like a love letter to the 60s and to sort of the golden age of superheroes, and it felt like it was the sort of very vintage look at it. It kind of gave me Incredibles vibes, not necessarily in any one particular thing, and it didn't seem that similar, but their approach, I think, to the world, to the people, specifically the relationship that the public has to superheroes, feels very similar to the Incredibles in a lot of moments. But what I think it being in its own universe could do is it could mean that they had montages that felt very like 60s movie spliced with film. They had like a couple like newsreel segments that were supposed to have been made in that era. They had some things that were made in the era and some things that were made that were not supposed to be diegetic. They were made as part of the movie but were influenced by the era, and so there was a lot of 60s era filmmaking represented. And I said in our conversation before the movie came out, so much of what we know and think about when we think about a previous era is influenced by the media that was made during it. So when we think of the 60s, we are thinking of the things that happened, but when we think of what it felt like to be there, we're looking at pictures, we're looking at videos, we're thinking about films. And so to emulate the kind of film processes, but also the kind of media that was made there, to sort of try to emulate the entertainment from the 60s, it makes it feel more like it was in the 60s. And this never went too far into, they're trying to make a period piece, they're trying to make something that really feels like it was made in the 60s and ends up being too much. This was still a modern film, but it drew influences. It was a modern film that had an inspiration and had a point of origin, and they used those, and that was part of the style, was trying to harken back to a different era without abandoning this one. And that was really exciting. It had a lot of references to it. I mean, there were montages that I think spliced actual footage from the era in with movie footage shot for this movie. There's a scene where they have footage from around the world, and they have it seems like actual shots from around the world, but then they also have shots that clearly like they have plot specific elements. So either they edited old footage or they shot new footage, and there is some footage that has to be original because it features the actual characters, but it's hard to tell which is which. It all feels very genuine and consistent, and this movie felt very consistent. There's one Easter egg that I noticed is during one of the montages, the song they were playing was called "Nation on Wheels." The song was written for a Disney TV special back in the '60s, in that era, and it was all about transportation and about sort of the future of transportation and cars. But then specifically, that song would later be reused in Disneyland. Disneyland has one of their themed lands in the park is Tomorrowland, which is sort of themed to a retro future style similar to the Fantastic Four. Not exactly the same, but a similar design feeling, if not the same aesthetic. And there's an attraction called the People Mover there, which we would let people get in sort of a little train that would take you above the land and through different attractions and show you Tomorrowland. And that was the song that was used during that, was Nation on Wheels. And this montage all about this progress, this Fantastic Four. It's sort of their origin story packaged into a little newsreel for a brief exposition dump that feels very well done. But it featured that song. And that was a very nice nod to that era of optimism about technology, right? Technology at the time wasn't scary. It wasn't AI. It wasn't these complicated things. It wasn't algorithms ruining your life. Technology in the era was thought of as, the new horizon. We're going to revolutionize things. We are going to see the future. And yes, some of that is the retro future aesthetic, but also some of it's real. There's a lot of voice activation, and yeah, like there was Jarvis and stuff in the MCU, but I feel like there was a lot more just this voice activation felt like what people in the 60s thought the future would be like. And that nod to something made in the era that was all about transportation and about that kind of optimism was really nice, especially since the Fantastic Four are going to start doing a meet and greet in Disneyland, in Tomorrowland. So that's sort of a whole combination of things, and I don't know if that was on purpose because the filmmakers knew that they were going to Disneyland, or if that was just a happy accident because they're both. It makes sense for them to go there, but it's very clear that everybody involved in this knew what kind of movie they were making, and they made it. And it's really good, and it's really consistent. It does occasionally fall into, all right, yeah, I know, it's a superhero movie, you gotta do that. There's one scene where they're talking to Galactus for the first time, and it's like, all right, listen, this is the scene that needs to happen in the movie, I understand. But I think other than that one moment, it felt very unique, and it was the entire movie, like every single scene was very intentional. The cast was phenomenal. Pedro Pascal can do anything apparently, but also the rest of the cast, they all really embodied their characters in a way that was very impressive. And just like I forgot they were using CGI, I forgot they were acting. It really felt like I was just watching this story unfold, which is a unique experience. I really wasn't expecting something so fully formed. Not that Marvel can't do that, but they haven't. This has an artistic direction, and every arm of the production had the same vision, and they all worked together to find that vision. And the story is very interesting. It's a superhero movie that doesn't include a lot of fight scenes. There are some, because there have to be some. They are superheroes, but it's a lot more of a thinking movie, right? And I'm not going to spoil anything here. Galactus is the villain of the movie, and he is this big, monumental villain that cannot really be defeated. And so it ends up being more of a, how do we outsmart him? What do we do to get him to go away? How do we stop him from doing what he wants to do? Instead of how do we destroy him? How do we kill him? How do we incapacitate him? Because you can't really do that. And so it becomes a movie about science, about humanity, about working together, about making this plan. And that's really refreshing, because a lot of times the Marvel movies are, you gotta fight something, you gotta do a fight scene, then you gotta do another fight scene, then you're done. And it was a movie about the characters, and there were some fight scenes in there, but that was not the main thing. The main thing was the characters who have superpowers and used them, like, around the Baxter Building, which looks gorgeous. I love the Baxter Building. I want to live in the Baxter Building. And they use the powers, but they use the powers the way we use our skills. Right, they use the powers to do things and Johnny would fly around for things other than a fight, because when you can fly around, you fly around, and so there was a relationship with their powers that felt also sort of Incredibles-ish, where it was like, we're going to use these as skills that we have, And when we need to, we'll fight people with them. But that's not our first instinct. Our first instinct is to try to negotiate and reason. And that is, I think inherently sort of a retro future thing is that, we're gonna eliminate conflict, we're gonna build this infrastructure, we're gonna be okay, we can rationalize things. And it's really refreshing because it feels very distinct and very crystal clear about the kind of movie they're making. It feels very optimistic, and that is not something you get from a lot of movies, where it starts optimistic and it stays pretty optimistic the entire time. Even in the face of danger, there's still a feeling of like, we're gonna figure this out, and not like, we're really beat down, but we're gonna get him. It's like, no, we're gonna help people, and then it ends optimistic, and then there's a twist at the end that I won't spoil, but that's also really good, and I think that's the first moment where I was like, okay, I don't know what to think, because they didn't tell us enough to make me optimistic or not optimistic. But that tone is really unique and very well done and very refreshing. And the story tracks remarkably well. It feels they mapped this out. They workshopped it. There are a couple problems that I have with individual moments, and like there's a few things that I don't think pay off as well as they should. It's not literally perfect because, why would it be? No movie is perfect, but it's very close because it's very well thought out. Everything that happens feels organic. It doesn't feel like there's some, as I say in the article, an invisible hand of the screenwriter that is, this thing is going to happen and this makes sense. And there are sometimes when it's obvious it's a plot contrivance, or sometimes when there is an explanation, but it feels like, yeah, I guess that technically explains it. But this really does feel like everything that the characters do immediately sets up what comes next. And there are enough characters, and the characters are distinct enough from each other to all have different motivations and different things they're going for. And so you can do a lot of things just by a different character is the one leading the plot. This character does something and it pushes the story left. This character does something and it goes back right. This character does something and so it goes up. And so the plot is unique and interesting and going in different directions, but not because you're pushing it there, because the different characters are doing the things that are in character for them to do. And that is really exciting to see. I really, really enjoyed this movie. It doesn't feel like an MCU movie at all, but it does feel like a different kind of superhero movie. It feels like a reinvention of the genre, really, making something that does not feel at all like what I've seen, but does still. It is still a superhero movie, but it's not the kind we're used to. And I'm very interested to see. Spider-Man has a movie coming up. The Avengers are going to be in a 2-part movie coming up. And then we're going to reset the timeline. And the Fantastic Four are likely going to be somewhere in there. Well, we know they're going to be in the team-up movies. I don't know what beyond that. This cast is very, very busy. Pedro Pascal is doing everything else. And the rest of the cast is also busy, but it's not at Pedro Pascal levels. So I'll be interested to see what they do. And if they can sustain this tone with different directors, with different writers, if they can sustain this style. Because how do you... are they going to still feel like retro, futuristic, optimistic superheroes when they're in the main MCU continuity? I don't know. But I think at the very least, this is a good movie. And if they can sustain this tone, and if they can sustain this style and make something that is that unique, I think it would be a marked step for the MCU in creating something that is very different than what they've done before. So I'm excited to see where it goes, because I think if they can keep it up, they're going to have a lot of success on their hands. The Collegiate Live is the official podcast of GRCC student publication The Collegiate. For more information or to submit a question to be read on air, go to thecollegiatelive.com/podcast.